when you pull on that jersey, you represent yourself and your teammates. And a name on the front is a hell of a lot more important than the one on the back. Get that through your head.
And here we go.
And it is no good. He missed it. Are you kidding me? The season can't end like that.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Some goofball in a hat and a red shirt. Now he takes off the shirt. He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs to the 50. He runs to the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man.
And here we go once again. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of the off-season here in the SFL, and welcome back to the program, otherwise known as NETMA. I am the host of the show, otherwise known as Tyler Falk. Glad to have you here as we missed out on Friday's show. So we're going to go ahead and kick off with the Season 17. I'm going back in time, right? Let's break down a season schedule from 2 seasons ago, right? No, we're going to break down Season 19 schedule with 28 teams, not just 24, in this upcoming season. Spend some time away from the show. You lose a little bit how to speak at some points, it seems. Anywho, so we've got some stuff going on in the league as well. Not a whole lot of signings. Not a whole lot of free agent acquisitions anymore. It's all kind of died out as far as all the flurry of activity. Nothing really happening as far as re-signings go. Suda Nakai, just updating his contract a little bit. Chris Porter, probably the last of the free agent signings we can take a look right there. Last 3-4 days, he's been the only real new signing for really any team. Except for Doug Britton, readjusting his contract. Both Louisiana and Denver making some adjustments. A couple of newer names, I would say, jumping into the fold for Louisiana. Denver adjusting, bringing in a middle linebacker. But probably the biggest news coming out of what we see here is Matty Coffins comes into play, punter for Baltimore, and that can only mean that Baltimore is now the second team to not be able to partake in the draft, because they've got 23 players, unless things change, and they still got time to adjust their lineups if they still want to take part in the draft. However, as things stand, Baltimore is going to be at 23 players. Their offseason is over, at least at this point. So Arizona and Baltimore not going to take part in the draft. Some loyalty points been put on, especially for a couple other players like Denver's Logan Keel. He gets adjusted. That Riley Contreras, Logan Keel, both at 100 for getting paid. 2 big contracts there being adjusted. Let's take a look further down. Really, the only other busy bee of the weekend, that'd be Louisiana. A couple of changes. They bring in a wide receiver 3, Salvatore in Napoli, and Levy Lease comes into play, tight end number 2 for the Revs. They're up to 20 players coming into today. All right, so let's get out of off-season. Let's start talking season 19 for really the first time of this season, right? Let's just go ahead and jump right in the Atlantic Division. As things stand for the Atlantic Division, again, all these divisions getting shuffled around just a little bit. Baltimore, Carolina, Charleston, D.C., your Atlantic Division for season 19. Baltimore and D.C. stick around. They welcome in Carolina and Charleston from the not the East Division. Yeah, No, they like division. Baltimore and DC come out of the North. There we go. Let's go ahead and get to Carolina. And if you didn't see, Carolina, in my personal opinion, is probably going to have the toughest time. I'm not making any predictions. That comes later. The screaming comes later. Anywho, but Carolina has the toughest schedule on paper when you compare them against teams that finished in season 18. Which means Carolina is going to be facing the most amount of teams with a winning record from season 18. I think I counted 9 teams in total. We got Charleston, DC on there. That's 2. Vancouver, Tulsa, Baltimore, 5. Okay, it's 7. Sioux Falls and Charleston make up that. They do have 3 out of the 4 expansion teams. The reason why I think Carolina is going to struggle is because they're playing some really good teams. It's not to say that Carolina is going to finish at 2-10, so hold your horses there, Mr. Prasad. But Carolina has a real tough schedule, and I think Eddie Gage is going to attest to that too. But then again, Eddie Gage is always going to say his schedule is always tougher, and any team's going to say their schedule is tough. Carolina on paper, though, they've got a pretty tough schedule, including that in-between bit between the 2 bye weeks. You got Vancouver, Seattle to break up Vancouver, Tulsa, and then you got Minnesota to break up Tulsa, Baltimore. Some really tough teams. Tulsa, a runner-up in the East Division behind Louisiana. They've had a resurgence, a renaissance from last season, of course, as they try to compound and compile some really good seasons back to back. Vancouver, of course, 11-1. Baltimore, 10-1 or 10-2, excuse me, and also, of course, the champions of season 18. So a real tough middle of the park stretch for Carolina to come out of. As we take a look at the defending champions, really Baltimore, I think, got off with a pretty decent schedule. Right, the biggest test for them is going to be right away in week 3, of course, when they play Vancouver. 11-1 last season, really good offense. However, we do know that, of course, Vancouver is changing quarterbacks. Tom Pepper out, in comes Christian Brown to see what he can do. Can the sidearm sling help out Vancouver just a little bit against Baltimore? But Baltimore again have a very, very balanced schedule. It's not going to be easy sailing for the Vultures. However, they're going to get a majority of their victories. I'd say really early on. Those first 5 or 6 games, I think, will probably be a repeat of season 18, season 17. Look to be a 3 of a kind where Baltimore has a really good start. They play DC to start off with, and they play LA in week 2. So not making any predictions, but it also would not surprise me for Baltimore to have a few extra losses on the schedule because of the caliber of teams and the defenses that these teams can come up with. On to Charleston and DC for the Predators and for the Dragons. Their matchup against each other for Charleston, right when they come off that bye, it'll be crucial for the Preds to get a good win over DC, while the Dragons, kind of like their predecessors over in Baltimore, it's a Vancouver matchup. It's the last one before their first bye. If they can have a good result to finish out their initial stretch, I think they'll be okay. They have a very, very similar schedule to how Carolina has their middle of the park section. They start off with a team that had double-digit wins. They end off their first 5 with a team who had double-digit wins. So DC going to be looking to start off hot in some really, really, at least on paper, some tough competition. All right, as we move on to the North Division, Canton, London, Motor City, aka Detroit, and Queen City all jump in to the North Division. Canton, the Classics, I think, their first test is going to be week 3. London, you got two expansion teams you're playing against week 1, week 2, and then London, who has can turn it on a heartbeat with Johnny Pickler and that passing attack. Canton, that's their first real test, is London. It's going to be interesting. I think games 1 and 2 are going to be, a good feeling out process, but going up against your first well-established club is going to be their first test and going to really test the mettle of the Class 6 and see if their bronze busts can hold up to the Knights. And speaking of Knights, we talked about Carolina just a little bit ago and how they faced the most amount of opponents with an above 500 record, which also meant that they were in the playoffs. London gets they get the long side of the stick. Instead of the short side of the stick, they get the long side. They get to play the team. They have the least amount of teams that were above 500 last season. Only 3 on the board, and their last opponent above 500 is Vancouver, and that's week 8. So just 3 opponents that, again, have playoff experience from a season ago, as London's going to play 3 out of the 4. No, just 3 out of the 4. 3 out of the 4 expansion teams. No, there's Seattle on the board. No Indy. There's Indy, Canton, Minnesota, Seattle. They play all 4. What am I talking about? Anyhoozle, London. If they can get past Vancouver, maybe with a win, if they can maybe shock the system, maybe Vancouver's struggling, trying to figure out their new system with CB12. London might be in a real good shot to not just sneak into the playoffs, but have a really good shot of maybe getting close to double-digit wins this season. Again, if they play their cards right. Again, if they can figure something out. Motor City relocated from St. Louis, of course. The V8s, as they're known, being from the Midwest, I almost want to say Motor City Kitties, but one of their mascots is a dog, so I can't really say that. Got the reference, great. If not, there's some NFC North humor for you. Anywho, on to the SFL North, in the North Division. That middle of the park section, Motor City. I think we could see a number of teams from the North. If you just look at this on paper, a number of teams, if they're in the right frame of mind, if they can figure things out early, they should stand. A bunch of these teams in the North Division have a really good shot of going one way or the other. I think it's feast or famine. For Motor City, from week 5 to week 12, they only played 2 teams that were here last season. They have all 4 expansion franchises in the middle right there. So if Motor City can pick something up, if Motor City can find a way to get wins with a new quarterback, which is more than likely at this point looking to be a rookie, maybe they figure something out. Maybe they get something going. Again, rosters yet to be finalized and all that sort of jazz. But Motor City could take advantage. Queen City, on the other hand, they stand to, just looking at their schedule, and again, the North, each division has a very similar schedule, right? They all are going to play the same divisions. North is going to play the Central and the Pacific. But with a lot of changes to that roster this past offseason, Queen City, I think, are going to struggle. Again, just on paper, and kind of like Motor City, they have a big stretch. They have a little stretch of games where they play a bunch of these expansion franchises, and that's where they need to take advantage. That middle 3. In between the 2 bye weeks, 2 very early bye weeks, week 4 and week 8 for Queen City. But if they can take wins versus Minnesota, Indy, and Canton, which Indy and Canton are both at home, and they get Tulsa, a runner-up in the East Division, on the road. If they can maybe string those 3 games together, Queen City might be looking on the up and up as we move on to the East Division. Florida and Jacksonville come over to the East from the Atlantic Division, and Atlanta and Louisiana stay put, and it's looking like a traditional SEC conference with Atlanta, Florida, Jacksonville, Louisiana. As we start with Atlanta, all the way at the beginning of the alphabet. Well, or you imagine that, A at the beginning of the alphabet. I'm losing my train of focus. Atlanta have 2 games off the bat, weeks 1 and 2 at Arizona and Jacksonville, but the game I'm looking for is right after that first bye week. They have their first 3 of 5 on the road. They get Houston and Denver at home, but they face their first team over 500, being Florida, from a season ago in week 7, coming off a bye week at home. What needs to happen for Atlanta is to find a way to stop Beletsky, of course, to stop Ron Cochran, stop the entire team. Let's just say it as it is. Atlanta's going to have to really recover from that 4-8 they had last season. It's going to take a really good first half of that schedule for Atlanta to feel confident. They're going to have to win at least 2 of their first 4 away games, which, if you look on paper, it's not unrealistic. Maybe they can scrape 3 out of there, but it's going to be a real tough division for all these teams. It's a very, very jam-packed division. All these teams have either been in a championship game, have won championships, or have played really well. That's in the case of Louisiana. Louisiana not been near, I want to say they haven't, in franchise history, not been to the championship game. I think they've gotten close, if my SFL history serves me right. But you're taking Atlanta, former champion. Florida, back-to-back former champion. Jacksonville, very good pedigree. Louisiana is more the team that's on the up and up. This might be, I'm almost scared to say it because I got, ties to Louisiana, but I think Louisiana might be the outside team looking in if you just look at the pedigree of these teams. Now, the most recent history suggests that Louisiana should be in contention with everybody, but it's going to be a dog-eat-dog, fight for this division. There really isn't an Alabama in this SEC version of the East Division. But it's going to be a real tough fight, and every conference game is going to be like a playoff game. That's how this division feels. The Storm, if we just take a look at what the Storm have to go through, they have a very, very symmetrical schedule. They have a bye week 5 and they have a bye week 10, which means they have three sets of 4 games, which will be really good benchmarks for the Storm to take a really good look back at how they're doing. If they can be at 500 or better for each and every, section, they should be okay. We just learned from last season that 500 doesn't cut it. It's not going to cut it for the most part anymore. We might get lucky again this season, but it's going to be a very tough battle, especially with some really tight divisions. Every division this season, I think, is going to be pretty tight, including the Pacific Division, where Vancouver last season ran away with it. Now they have a new quarterback, which might shake up things once or twice. Anywho, on to Jacksonville. The last 2 games for me, I think, is where Jacksonville's going to win or lose. They fell apart at the end of last season. Not really putting things together toward the end of that season, where, if I can just find my research, Jacksonville, back-to-back losses to close up the season in playoffs. Lost to Florida at home, Carolina, surprisingly on the road, with Logan Jack going off for 4 touchdowns. Now they have 2 games on the road to close out a season, and are against some up-and-coming teams. Houston, Atlanta, where we saw them struggle against Carolina, who had struggled to put things together. They were 3-8 coming to that Week 14 game. And somehow Carolina found a way to surprise Jacksonville. It's going to be a very tough fight for the Kings here in Season 19 as we move on to the Revolution. Now, the Revolution are moving away from the 2-back system. It's Squarebush's backfield. So for the Revolution, it's back to more of a traditional SFL system. And for them, It's going to be a real tough opening of the season because they've got all 5 of their 6 away games are in their first 8 weeks of the SFL season. So Louisiana is going to have to take advantage of the back 5 games, 4 of 5 at home. And they've got a couple of really good teams that they're playing at home. They've got Mexico City at home and they got Florida at home to close out the season. They fly away to San Diego week 13, which could spell trap game for the Revolution. I'm already calling a trap game, and we haven't even hit the field yet in season 19. So Louisiana has to keep focus if they want to retain the East Division title. On to the Central. Lots of intrigue here. Sioux Falls come away with the West Division title. Tulsa nearly come away with the East, but just fall just short. And now they welcome in 2 new expansion teams into a brand new Central Division. Tulsa have been in a Central Division before in seasons past. Now they're back in a Central Division. But it's a whole brand new look for this iteration. Indianapolis and Minnesota, 2 more expansion franchises we'll talk about. Indianapolis and Minnesota both have real tough schedules. Indianapolis probably have the easier start with first 3 of 5 at home. Minnesota, first 2 of 3 on the road. They'll play an expansion franchise Canton in Las Vegas, and they'll play Sioux Falls, maybe the returning champions, if you will. So for Indianapolis, that first little stretch of maybe picking off, London, Tulsa, Sioux Falls, Canton, all but Canton were here last season, and all 3 out of the 4 teams were in the playoffs last season. So it's a really early test for Indianapolis. You got to come out of the gate and you got to play strong. Minnesota, that middle section, Motor City, London, Tulsa. Again, or Mexico City. Or yeah, it's Motor City, not Mexico City. My apologies. Motor City on the road, London on the road, Tulsa at home. The back 2 games, I think, is going to be where we find out what type of Minnesota team we have. Do we have a new incarnation of a Minnesota team that might make the playoffs? Or are we going to have maybe them fall to the wayside, maybe just miss the playoffs? That middle section will be key. On to Sioux Falls as they look to maybe find a new division and a new title to go along with it. Baltimore, Tulsa, Charleston, weeks 8 through 10. A very tough schedule. Again, in between bye weeks, kind of like Minnesota. That's their middle of the park. That's their tough schedule. It's a tough slate. Besides Tulsa, 2 division winners. And Tulsa could probably, in some divisions last season, probably have been pretty close, including the Atlantic Division with Florida and Charleston. So, Sioux Falls has that tough middle of the park. If they come away with 2 out of 3 wins, they might just stand a chance to repeat as division title winners in the newly christened Central Division. For Tulsa, can they keep the good times rolling? For them, it's the stereotypical back half of their schedule. They have a kind of similar mark to way Florida. They get a week 8 and week 10, or week 5 and week 10 bye, which means they can split up their season into 3 trimesters where they can figure out A, B, C, how did I perform in my little stints. Back half is crucial. Back half is extremely crucial. All 4 of those teams were in the playoffs last season. So they're going to have to finish strong and prove that they belong in the playoffs again in season 19. On to the South, aka Tex-Mex division. We need a real resurgence from a couple of teams. Houston missed out in the playoffs. Fort Worth struggled to find wins until late on in the season when it was already too late. Lone Star took victory over Mexico City and took that division last season, and they get each other again to finish out the regular season. They'll play each other twice this season. For Fort Worth, The biggest ask for them is if the two toughest opponents on the schedule to begin the season is Lone Star, Louisiana. Both teams finished 8-4. Both teams won a division. How much will Fort Worth have improved after a season where their defense couldn't really find stops until the end of the season? Their offense couldn't get clicking to the end of the season. Where do the Toros go this season? Houston, on the other hand, it's on middle of the park, and they also have a 3 trimester slate. That middle of the park where they have 3 of 4 games on the road, and all 3 games on the road are against teams that were in the playoffs and or won a division title. So a real tough middle slate for Houston as we move on to Lone Star. And say it with me, it's a middle of the park slate. Denver, Arizona, Houston, I think are games that could trip up the glory just a little bit. If they go in with a very strong performance and continue where they left and, keep the fire of, maybe not performing as they would like to have hoped to in the championship game, maybe we find Lone Star with another 8, maybe 9 win season. But that middle section where all 3 teams finished below 500 is a real test to see, can you not only hinder the development of other teams while maintaining your own, but can you find ways to win in games that, now that you're a runner-up, should win? Or are we going to fall back as runner-ups and maybe change too much? For Mexico City, it's a season where they're unable to find the division title. San Diego, Las Vegas, we talk about trap games with Lone Star. San Diego, Las Vegas, I just have a strange feeling that those 2 games are going to be games that Mexico City drops. I just have a weird feeling. They play San Diego at home, which doesn't seem all that bad, but I just wonder if San Diego puts something together this offseason and finds a way to beat Mexico City. I just have a I got a bad feeling about it for San Diego playing Mexico City. For some odd reason, I don't have anything to back it up. We don't have any evidence of it yet. I just don't like those 2 games from Mexico City. But I think the Aztecs should make the playoffs this season. Again, official prediction to come down the line, but just initial reactions should see both Lone Star and Mexico City back in the playoffs. Maybe we see Fort Worth and Houston. On to the West Division. Out with Sioux Falls, in comes San Diego. The Scorpions, Nightwings, and Fury all failing to make the playoffs last season, with the Fury coming the closest at 500. For Arizona and Engage and Company, that first 2 games after the second bye week, Florida and Jacksonville, when they play 2 clubs that have really good pedigree, that should again have a pretty decent season if all things go well. Eddie Gage is going to have to is got his hands full at the end of that season. Can they find a way to take them down? On to Denver. Biggest stumbling block I see for them is Lone Star Week 7. Right in the middle of that 5-game stretch in between the 2 bye weeks. All the other games around them seem like decent matchups, but that first game before they play Jacksonville, when they play Lone Star on the road, is going to be the test to see if Denver has developed. Can they find a way to make it back to the playoffs? That game versus Lone Star Week 7 will tell the tale. For the Fury, they have 5 games in their third section. 4 of 5 of them are on the road. If San Diego turn things around, if Atlanta and Arizona have a hot streak, Las Vegas are going to have to be like a phoenix and rise up from out of nowhere and get maybe a little of that spunkiness they had back in season 17 and turn on the flames once again. That back half of the schedule, that last 5 games for them, that last big stretch, that's a tough ask for Las Vegas. On to San Diego. Does the new division help them or does it hurt them? You have some really good offenses in the Pacific Portland at times could have a pretty decent offense, good running game. But now the Mavericks coming into a division where defense has played a crucial role. Arizona, Denver, especially. Two of the best defenses over the last couple of seasons. That will not change. San Diego is going to have their hands full with opposing defenses in their division. That's the biggest test for them. Can they find victory against tough defenses and not leave it to the last second into garbage time where they throw a bunch of touchdowns and pad the stats, but find ways to win outright and get off to a good start? That's something they struggled with last season, that it shows with how they finished the season 3-9. On to the last division, the seventh and final division we're going to cover, the Pacific. Los Angeles, Portland, and Vancouver welcome Seattle back to the fray, with the Nemesis joining the league here in season 19. Los Angeles, it was a story of struggle for them. That first block where they played Baltimore and Vancouver in the first 4 games. Tough start. Very tough start. Then you get Vancouver close out your season. If anything's to go by, if Baltimore and Vancouver are just as good as they were last season, Los Angeles needs to do a really good job of picking up wins against every other team if they cannot compete against Baltimore, Vancouver, which could spell doom for their season. Portland, you're going to need to do a lot. It's not been, the last couple seasons have not been what Portland has ever wanted. They get Vancouver week 1. It's another tough stretch to start off the season. After Vancouver, they close out that first 4 games with Baltimore. Portland's got a tough start. Los Angeles has got a tough start. Can Portland find a way to get off to a good start? Maybe pick up a win or 2. But it's tough. It's going to be tough for Portland. I would not be surprised if Portland, if they did not improve over the past offseason, if Portland has not improved, if they have not changed anything, maybe a new quarterback helps. But if they cannot find a way to get past their struggles, Portland's going to be in for another rough sail. On to Seattle. Again, starting off hot is key. They do not get Baltimore or Vancouver in their first couple of games before that first bye, which will give them an extra week to prepare for Baltimore, which could mean the difference for Seattle and them having a strong season. Their first 2 or 3 are on the road. Charleston and Los Angeles. I think Seattle, if they can pull off maybe 2 or 3 wins, have an extra week to game plan for Baltimore, Seattle might be maybe a dark horse to challenge Vancouver for the division title. As we talk about the hottest team from a season ago, unfortunately, missing out on not only the championship, or not only taking home the ring, but missing out in the championship game, just falling short in the semis to Lone Star. It's maybe the SFL championship we should have got week 3. That's the biggest test, especially with a newer, younger quarterback in Christian Brown. He isn't going to have the same pop that Tom Pepper had, but that's going to be the first test for Christian Brown in his new blue and white gigs. So that is how things are going to shape out. There we go. That's how things are going to shape out for my initial reactions of the season 19 schedule. What's your guys' thought? Who's finishing first? Who's finishing with 2-10? But it's all up to you now. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit more about the offseason, talk a little bit more about the SFL and how the things go. Maybe we get a couple extra signings now. Maybe I've talked about it here just a little bit. But that is going to do it here for this edition of the program. And until tomorrow, everybody, it's good morning, good afternoon, and good night.